Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? I figured I might as well talk about the positive part of this and the good side before I start talking about the dark side. Now, on the positive side, Terence Crawford is the truth. He is the best fighter at 135 pounds. He has showed adversity in all of his fights. It doesn't matter if you run away from him. It doesn't matter if you come after him. He will adjust to whatever style that's in front of him. And that right there is a special fighter. Like I said, there's been a lot of fighters out there who look terrific against a particular flat-footed fighter. As soon as they fought someone who was a little bit smarter and was a counterpuncher, all of a sudden they fell apart and they didn't know what to do. That's not the case with Terence Crawford. He's a very good fighter. He's going to be very, very difficult to beat. I see him cracking the top 10 pound-for-pound list very shortly. There's really nothing negative you could say about Terence Crawford right now. For those of you guys who don't know, it was Mikey Garcia who actually discovered Terence Crawford. When it comes to Crawford being signed by Top Rank or Bob Arum, they basically came to Mikey Garcia and asked him if he knew anyone because they were looking for new, fresh talent for the promotional team. And Mikey Garcia, he said, well, there's this guy named Terence Crawford who beat me a couple times as an amateur, and he's really good. So that's how Terence Crawford got discovered and got signed with Top Rank. Now, with that out the way, let's go ahead and get into the dark side of this video. So I began asking you guys this question. Why is it when Narvaez, or I should say when Donaire fought against Narvaez, the fight was extremely slow and it was boring? Occasionally there were boos in the crowd. But when Donaire was in that situation, they blamed Narvaez on the fight being boring. They said nothing bad about Donaire, and they made sure they said nothing bad about the fight in its whole, right? But when Terence Crawford fights a guy who's being defensive and running away, etc., why is it that's when Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman, they blame it on Terence Crawford? Well, Terence Crawford should do more. Well, winning is not everything, etc. How come they weren't saying that when Donaire was fighting against Narvaez? How come they didn't say that when Manny Pacquiao was fighting against Joshua Clottey? When Joshua Clottey was fighting Manny Pacquiao, there was no one saying, I can't wait for this fight to be over. There was no one saying, well, if you can win every single round, you should be able to do more to entertain the fans. No, they weren't saying that. Because why? They were protecting their favorite fighters. When Manny Pacquiao was fighting against Joshua Clottey, Jim Lampley, every insult he had, it was directed to Joshua Clottey. Even in those first couple rounds when Joshua Clottey was doing pretty good and he was making the fight competitive, even when he was doing good, Jim Lampley would say some shit like, well, there's no way he can win the fight by throwing this amount of punches, etc. He's not active enough. He's still losing all the rounds, etc. He was talking about Joshua Clottey's reluctance. He was talking about Joshua Clottey making the fight boring. And if there were ever any boos in the crowd, instead of Jim Lampley saying now the crowd is booing like he always says when there's a black fighter fighting, what he would say when there's boos in a Manny Pacquiao or Narvaez fight is he would say now the crowd is booing Narvaez because he won't engage. Now the crowd is booing Joshua Clottey because he won't engage. It's all fucking hypocritical, man. When Pacquiao was fighting against Joshua Clottey in that slow fight, Jim Lampley was constantly defending Manny Pacquiao by saying, yeah, but it's Manny that's winning all the rounds. Manny is winning all the rounds. But when Terence Crawford was winning all the rounds, Jim Lampley said, yeah, but you have to do more. You can't just win the rounds. That's not good enough. When Oscar De La Hoya was running and wasn't even engaging Trinidad, the crowd started to boo. You know what Jim Lampley said? He says, oh, look, the Puerto Rican fans are booing Oscar De La Hoya because he's outboxing Trinidad right now, and he won't give Trinidad an opportunity to hit him. That's what he said. See, when it was his favorite fighter, it was the Puerto Rican fans that were booing. But see, when Guillermo Rigo is outboxing the shit out of Donaire and not giving Donaire an opportunity to hit him, and the crowd starts booing, then Max Kellerman starts talking about the crowd is booing Rigo, and the boos are directed towards Rigo. He made that clear. He didn't just say the crowd is booing. He wanted people to realize or believe the crowd was booing Rigo in particular. And speaking of booing, do you guys remember the end of the Donaire-Rigo fight when Max Kellerman came up and he interviewed Rigo, and the first thing he tried to do, just like he did in the Bradley fight, the first thing Max tried to do is take away Rigo's shine. The first thing he brings up is, well, you know, the crowd was booing you. What do you think about that? And when he says the crowd is booing you, he always pauses with the microphone so that he can elicit more boos from the crowd, because obviously when you bring up boos, you know the crowd, they're going to boo even more. These are people who was going for Donaire. They were supporting Donaire to win the fight. So, he elicited more boos from the crowd. But what was funny and very fucking biased is when Max Kellerman interviewed Donaire, Donaire started making excuses for why he lost the fight. Soon as he did that, the crowd started booing Donaire. And when the crowd started booing Donaire, you know what Max Kellerman did? He started to defend Donaire. And he started saying, well, hey, we have to understand something. If Donaire said, that he lost because of this and blah, blah, this and blah, blah, that, he started defending Donaire because the crowd was booing him. Okay? These motherfuckers at HBO are nothing but a damn joke. They ain't nothing but a bunch of comedians, and not funny ones. When it comes to Max Kellerman, Max is trying to fill Larry Merchant's shoes. He's trying to be that old, grumpy, hard to please, tough critic. But the problem is, if you're contradicting everything you say, then you're not really making sense. I remember it was around the middle rounds of the fight, Max Kellerman, after criticizing Terence Crawford so much for not being entertaining enough, it was interesting because Max Kellerman, he made a dumb admission. He basically said, well, you know what? In Terence Crawford's last fight, I criticized him for being too aggressive and getting hit with punches. Now I'm basically saying he's not engaging enough. Well, I guess you can't win for losing, or whatever the saying is. That's what he said, okay? This is exactly what he said. So I guess he started to feel guilty because he was playing this fake-ass role of trying to just find some reason to criticize Terence Crawford, but then he realized he was making a huge contradiction. That's the problem. Everything that these guys say is recorded, so we can always go back and we can always find these cats contradicting themselves. I told you guys, Jim Lampley, he's on a different level. I don't give a fuck what no one says. You go back and watch my videos. Jim Lampley is a motherfucking racist. All right? Max Kellerman, I don't believe he's a racist. I just believe that he's trying to be the new Larry Merchant. But it's a damn shame when it comes to Max, because when Max first came to HBO, he was the opposite of Jim and Larry. He was that young, new, vibrant, addition to HBO, and it seemed like he was going to tell the truth because he started to be like that. He was, in a way, when he first started, he was something like a Paulie Malignaggi, because Paulie Malignaggi is a great analyst. He's a far better analyst than he is a boxer. And not saying he's a bad boxer, but he's just really good at being an analyst. One of my favorite right now. And to me, that's kind of what Max reminded me of when he first started. For those of you guys who don't know, Max Kellerman, he used to be a rapper. And in one of the video that he made, which was called Rumble, Young Man Rumble, it was interesting because he was dropping all type of boxing lines in there. Matter of fact, at one point, he even said, you get fucked up like Whitaker fucked up Chavez. Okay? So this is the type of swagger that Max Kellerman brought to HBO when he first came there. But now, I don't know if he's changing because of the network, maybe they're making him change, or if he's just feeling that he has to cater to Jim Lampley and the legacy of Larry Merchant. I mean, some of the things that Max Kellerman is saying recently is so openly biased, it's as if he's not even trying to hide it. For example, I was watching the Provodnikov versus Mike Alvarado face-off, and Max Kellerman, he asked Provodnikov, do you think you won the fight against Tim Bradley? And surprisingly to everyone, Provodnikov was very brutally honest, and he said, you know what, when I first fought him, I thought maybe I won, but when I went back and I watched it on tape, I realized the judges, they made the right decision. I thought that Bradley won the fight, and Bradley is a true champion. Now, this surprised the shit out of Max Kellerman because he was trying to set up the question for Provodnikov to tell everybody, yeah, of course I thought I won the fight. Just like when he set the question up with Manny Pacquiao, where he tells Bradley, we thought you lost the fight, and then he sets up the question for Pacquiao to say, I thought I won the fight. Of course Manny Pacquiao's going to say, I thought I won the fight after you just told the whole world that you thought that Tim Bradley lost the fight, right? So back to the Provodnikov situation. So when Max Kellerman hears Provodnikov tell the truth, he turns to Mike Alvarado and he says, well, he just said something that was surprising. He was very, very honest, but then he starts to still defend Provodnikov and saying, well, a lot of people believe that if some of those scorecards would have been 10-8, you could have still won the fight. He starts defending a man who was brutally honest in saying, I thought Tim Bradley beat me. I mean, what else is there to debate when the man himself says, I thought he beat me? I mean, that's case closed. Now, when Tim Bradley celebrated after beating Manny Pacquiao, they wanted to go back and replay Tim Bradley's reaction to when he won because they wanted to tell people that Tim Bradley didn't even believe he won himself, right? So if they want to assume that Tim Bradley didn't believe he really won the fight, here you have Provodnikov openly telling you, I did not win the fight, and you guys are still defending him. Do you guys see the fucking double standards here? These motherfuckers are a joke, man. And I'm telling you, man, I watched this fucking fight, and the commentary got so fucking bad that I couldn't even focus on watching the last couple of rounds because Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman were just going on a fucking tirade, right? And I could tell, you could tell Roy Jones, he wants to say something, but I'm telling you, man, these cats are so fucking powerful, and they argue with you. If you try to disagree with them, they will argue with you. Like they did with Emmanuel Stewart, they've done it with Roy Jones. After you guys could go back and watch my old videos. I have a video. Matter of fact, what was it? It was Manny Pacquiao versus Bradley, punch stats. I have a lot of clips in there where Jim Lampley is arguing with Emmanuel Stewart because he's disagreeing with them. It's just, poor sports, man. Just, they are fans is what they are. They are fans. And it's fucking ridiculous because we have to watch a fight and we have to listen to some fucking fans talk about who they like and who they don't like. Before the 7th round, Jim and Max, they were completely criticizing Terence Crawford, saying he needs to go for the knockout. He needs to fight more aggressive. The 7th round came, and all of a sudden, Terence Crawford, he started fighting aggressive. He started getting his opponent on the ropes, and he started trying to go for the knockout. And then they would admit, they said, now this is what he needs to do. Now this is what Terence needs to do, right? And then right after they say that, they go right back into talking about how this is a boring fight. This is that, right? But like I said, they didn't do that shit when Manny Pacquiao was involved in a boring fight, when Navarez was involved in a boring fight, when Vitaly Klitschko in a fucking clinch fest was involved in a boring ass fight. Not one time did Jim Lampley say this is a boring ass fight. I can't wait for this fight to be over. The 12th round couldn't come any fucking sooner. And by the way, I'm going to do a video on the Vitaly Klitschko or the Vladimir Klitschko fight as well. I'm just breaking these fights down individual videos. So for people saying that, Jim Lampley, he's not biased or he's not racist because he likes Terence Crawford. They like Terence Crawford a lot, etc., etc. This proves that Terence Crawford, he's in the same fucking column. He's in the same boat as Rigo, fucking Tim Bradley, and every other fighter